Welcome to day 4 of the 2020 Music Licensing Challenge. You have been doing so good so far keeping up, and today we're going to learn how to mix and master the track we've been working on, this corporate track here. Now, before we go any farther, I do want to let you know that I am going to do this a little faster than I normally would, but not too much faster. You really don't want to get bogged down in the process of mixing and mastering. You want to have a pretty good song sound before you go in the mixing and mastering part, which is why we spent so much time on the producing part. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't take time to mix and master when you're learning how to do it, and that's a whole other skill that you have to develop over time. But when you're actively making music, you want to be pretty quick about it and just trust your instincts, trust your ear. You can always make things sound better, but that's not what we're going for here. We're going for good to very good, but not great. So with that in mind, first thing I want to let you know is I exported all of the sounds as audio files. This both makes it so that you're kind of locked into the sounds, which makes you live with your choices. But also, before I did that, I went back and listened to the song a couple more times. It's always good to sleep on it. And I ended up changing the sound of this piano arpeggio. Oops, get out of here, Ozone. This piano arpeggio part to it more of like a bell part. So that used to be an electric piano. I think that just sits better. And I added some pads here, gated, filtered pads, just to fill it out a little bit more. Very subtle and quiet. But just adds a little more movement, a little more interest. And finally, I added just a bell tree here on the transition, because remember how I said how important transitions are? Well, they are that important, so let's... enter the mystery. So, there we have it. Those are the changes I made between yesterday and today. So now we're going to go to the mixing part. And the first thing I want you to know is that I put Ozone 9 on. You can use any limiter. This is what I'm going to use to master it with. But right now I'm not really trying to master. I just have it here to protect the levels so that we don't clip. And the other thing I'm going to let you know is that I had tracks panned previously. I turned all of those off when I exported it. So right now everything's up the middle. But we're going to start mixing in mono, because this really forces you to get everything to sound good together. And then we'll make it stereo and pan everything and make it sound pretty. So let's open... Oh, the other thing I'll let you know, a lot of prefaces, but this is how I start mixing, is that the drums I just did as a stereo. I could have done them as individual tracks, but honestly, you don't really need to do that for stock music. You just can go with the stereo tracks. That's all you need. So I'm going to set a loop here at the busiest part of the song where most of the instruments are playing, so that we can really get started with the mixing. And the first thing we want to do is set the levels. And so I don't recommend EQing. We can delete this track. Also, a clean session is a good session. You can see I don't have that many tracks here. It's no need to overdo it. Alright, it doesn't want to go away. Not a big deal. So, you don't EQ and compress necessarily in isolation, but I do like to get the levels set in isolation. So the first thing I want to do is just set the gain staging so that we can have the right levels for all of that. So while I was on the bass, I'll just make it mono. In order to make certain things sound wider, you have to make other things sound smaller. Bass should just be mono up the middle. So let's start with the drums and get the levels right. All we're trying to do is get levels right. We want to really be going for about -12 here. We'll make it all up later. And this gives us a reference point to mix everything else around. That'll do. Now let's bring in the bass. Similar with the -12. And that's probably just a little too loud. That probably works for me. Now on this song we'll bring the piano in since it's, this is just a unique thing to Logic. We've got to set everything to stereo pan, which lets you control the stereo width as opposed to just going left and right individual instruments. Too loud. Then we're going to go, we're doing backgrounds forward. So this strum, that sounds like a good level to me, at least to start with. This one's a little louder. Those two seem to sit better now. Okay. Now let's bring in the pads. Really loud. Oh, I never got the gain on this one. Even though we're not at -14, we just really want this to be barely. Okay, that sounds good to me. Now let's bring in strings. Way loud. Probably about right, at least for now. Now let's bring in these bells here. That's the last lead. Actually, no, let's get these first leads in. This is actually an effect. Alright, and now Alright, so that's more or less good enough for the levels. Now let's take it off of mono for a second. That sounds pretty good to me. Remember, we don't have any panning or EQ. So the next thing we're going to do is we'll turn off, we don't have all of these effects levels set yet, so let's go do that. Alright, so first, let's start with the drop, which hits here. Let's mute the bell tree because that's just too loud. We'll take that down about 3 dB, 4.5. Let's see. Maybe even a little bit more. We just want that to be really subtle. That's right there. Now for the bell tree, you probably need to take this down about 10 dB. Lucky 18. Blackjack. That works for me. We'll add some reverb and it'll sound really good. And then we've got this effect here. I'm sure it's going to need to go down. We'll start with -5. Perfect. Or at least good. Okay, so we've got the basic level set. Now we're going to do EQ. And the first step we're going to do is subtractive EQ. Basically, we're just going to take away all the nasty sounds. So we'll start with the drums. And we're going to solo them just because we want to look for bad frequencies. But first we need to get to the busy part of the song. And I have the wrong. This is. So the first thing you actually want to do is just listen to it and see if anything pops out to you as harsh. There's something down here that sounds a little. Yeah, that just knocks a little bit and not a useful way. And that's probably a pretty good frequency for the bass anyways. We'll just do a slight low end curve since you can't really hear it anyways. And I'm listening for, feels like there's something ringing on the snare. That's it. Okay, so what I'm doing is carving out space and taking nasty frequencies. We'll take some of the low end away from the bass, which gives it room for the kick. And there's usually something around 140 or something usually right below 200 that tends to sound bad on bass. There she blows. All right, now let's go for the piano. Well, all right, the bells. This is definitely resonant, but I worry I'll. Okay, and we can, not that it looks like there's any frequencies down here, but let's just cut them out anyway. Actual piano. I really don't want or need much of this low end. We've got the bass and drums covering that. Sounds like there's something right around here that's a little wonky. We're also going to take a little high end off just to make room for everything else. Like the guitar guitars and such like. Let's see if there's a build up here. Sometimes there is. Let's get the other guitar. Alright, so this initial guitar here, the first one we did, that's more about the body, and the other one's a little higher and more stringy. So we're going to cut a little of the highs off of the first one just to give it the other guitar a little room to breathe. Hear how much clearer that is now? The second one. Let's turn the EQ off. Kind of mushed together. Now this one pops out. And we'll do a lower cut on the second one. And now they both get to and I'm thinking this piano part is a little, needs to be brought down.